Welcome, food enthusiasts, to another episode of the FutureFoodCast. I'm Pam Miller, your host, and today we have a really fun guest with us. Tapan Shah is the head of Mondelez Snack Futures Ventures, and we're excited to welcome him to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here, and that was a bit of a mouthful, so you did it with flying colors.
Thanks so much. And a bit of a mouthful that you get to unpack for us now, Tapan, because a lot of us have heard of Mondelez, very huge company, very large company. But what about the Snack Futures Ventures piece of it that you're heading up? Can you tell us what you're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Snack Futures is a multifunctional team. I almost look at us as the tip of the spear of the future of food for Mondelez. Obviously, we have amazing, incredible global brands like Oreo and Cadbury and Ritz and many, many, many others. But as we look at the future of where consumers are moving, about 4 years ago, Snack Futures was created, and it had three kind of core tenets. One of those being what we call invent, which is a brand creation. So we actually have created our own brands, almost a group of intrapreneurs, we call that team, that are brands in both North America and Europe, things like Dark Kitchen Snacks in the US and No Koi in France, for example, are just a couple examples of that. We also are amplifying, so we're using our platform and the resources of Mondelez to support the ecosystem through our accelerator platform called coLab. And so coLab is a best-in-class 12-week accelerator for early stage companies. These are brands that are coming through no obligations to Mondelez. And I've been impressed with that platform because the commitment from our organization, from the top, from our CEO, Dirk Van de Put, all the way down has been amazing. And then lastly is the group that I head up, which is ventures. And so we are making venture capital investments in some of the most innovative early stage food and food technology companies around the world.
Wow, that sounds like a really fun situation to be in. I mean, your days have got to be different every single day. You're doing different things, looking at different companies and trying to figure out where to move next.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say for me as a venture capitalist, one of the most exciting things for me is always the opportunity to talk to founders and doing it in a way with Mondelez. And I think organizationally, the spirit and the support and the energy around my work have been amazing. My team is, the people that are around me, even though they're not working on ventures every day, have been amazing and enthusiastic, about just the ability to talk to, spend time with founders. Obviously, the founders in our portfolio, in particular, that just bring an energy to my day, and keep me on my toes. I love doing it. And ultimately, the ability to build partnerships, build relationships of a founder who always refers to, when he was deciding on who he's bringing in to, for investment is really building a family. And so I think that's just one of the most exciting parts of it.
Yeah, I like that you talk about the tip of the spear, just trying to figure out where things are going and who's on the front end of that. That's got to be very exciting. But what have you done before this that brings you to the point where you're in a position to evaluate these situations? I mean, Mondelez we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's very unusual, this whole investment approach and all the resources that they're putting into these three phases, and then ending on the phase that you're talking to us about right now with actually the investment piece. How did you get there?
Yeah, my story is interesting, and it's been a pretty fun one and a pretty unique one. So I graduated college and I got a job at Vitamin Water, which was a early stage growing company. I was one of the very early employees of the company, and actually it's where I met my wife. Both of our first days of work under the same boss, and was so life basically began then. And so I saw this brand, this rocket ship brand, grow from being early stage to obviously ultimately exiting to Coke. And in my mind, in my young nascent career where I didn't know anything, I was like, oh, that's what you do. You join a company and you exit to Coke for billions of dollars. And obviously, we all know that it's much harder than that and much rarer than that. But it was still, a seminal experience for me personally. I had amazing mentors at the organization. And ultimately, for me, going into traditional brand management was something I wanted to do. And I had good guidance from many of the leaders at the company. So I ended up going to business school and, getting my traditional brand management stripes under me. So I was at the Campbell Soup Company for 3 years, both in at headquarters in New Jersey and and at Pepperidge Farm in Connecticut. And for me, it really just built a strong analytic base that I didn't have from my work experience standpoint. But ultimately, the early stage world was the world that I always wanted to be in, where my roots were. And so I ultimately ended up going and being a part of the executive team at a growing restaurant chain in New York called Energy Kitchen. And that was an experience, and learned a lot in the failure that we had. But I was guided by an incredible leader, Mike Rapoli, there. Obviously, his successes are well documented. And when I left there, I ultimately had the opportunity to move to the investment side. And a very, very close friend of mine, Jordan Gaspar, now a close friend of mine, but I was just met her through a common friend. Her and a partner were launching what is now called AF Ventures, then called Excel Foods, and had the opportunity to move to the investment side. And under that team, I started with just like understanding the terminology, and then being a part of transactions, and then being part of boards and leading transactions, and had an amazing experience there. Took a little bit of break from the industry only industry I knew, and ended up getting an opportunity to be a part of the leadership team at PepsiCo Ventures, which is about 5 minutes from my house. And then had a conversation with Mondelez at this point almost 2 years ago, an initial conversation, and about a year and a half joined Mondelez, and the support, and kind of the passion that Mondelez as an organization has for what's going on in the early stage world, and the support I have in ventures is really top notch. And so we've got a lot of exciting things coming down the pipe.
Yeah. And your experience, as you explained it, really uniquely qualifies you. You realize had that unusual home run at the beginning with Vitamin Water, but then you've worked with some other really large names and gotten some good experience. And you talked about learning, going back to school and getting that piece of the data and analytics behind you, understanding, how that works with some of your experience. Being in the restaurant, that was that's an interesting piece too. But again, just experiencing a different side of things and how consumers react and all of that. So now you are really kind of taking advantage of all that experience to be able to figure out what's going on out there in the world, what consumers are looking for, and the trends that are going on. What are you seeing?
I think that there's a lot of common themes you're going to hear from others and peers of mine at strategics and funds. I look at trends as there's trends of today versus what are long-lasting trends. Like what trends become, the term that's been used to me by one of our executives, of what trends become sustainable long-term, not sustainable from an environmental standpoint, that is important. More from like what can go from a trend to being just kind of part of the everyday ethos. And so I think that there's ingredients, for example, people want to, throw around the term plant-based. I always say plant-based is always going to be important, but what the original one of the original plant-based foods was like potato chips. That is a plant-based food, right? Sure. I think it's more, what does plant-based actually mean to you? Does it mean eating cleaner, or does it mean that you're trying to find a 1-for-1 meat substitute? I think that we look at we do a lot of catch-all terms in this space because we want to hit those buzzwords where there's a lot of specificity around what are the drivers for consumers. Because I think conceptually plant-based has always been important. Things like eating more legumes and things of that nature that have always been, core part of healthy diets that frankly kind of have gotten left by the wayside because of the rise of frankenfood and things of that nature. So I look at what are we trying to solve. I also look at, things like functionality. I think functionality and real efficacious functionality, again, is something that I think is really important. Efficacious is a big one. The biggest functional food we have out there is like this caffeine, right? So you're getting caffeine from coffee, soda, whatever it may be. I think that there's a lot of opportunities in functional food, whether it's energy or things of that nature, gut health that are huge. But it's, again, what is efficacious, what is real? And I think a lot of that is where we're looking at places. And then lastly, I'd bring up the concept of sustainability. And sustainability can be as important as regenerative farming and upcycling to packaging and looking at all those different areas.
Yep. And we've covered all of those on different episodes of the Future Foodcast. So if you're out there listening to some of the things that Tapan is talking about, go check out some of our episodes on those topics. It was real interesting to me what you said about potato chips being a plant-based food, because from a marketing perspective, maybe some of the chip manufacturers could just change the marketing that, potato chips traditionally or health aren't looked at as the healthiest snack, although they're addictive and we love them. But maybe if marketing wise, you change it to plant-based foods, some of those that are more health inclined might now start eating potato chips more because it's plant-based food. I just had that thought. I don't think it would work, but
I think it's more like plant-based food. By the way, I've no criticism of like people trying to create the burger experience right through plants. I think that that's admirable, and it has its market. But again, I think that your point is exactly right. Like, what does plant-based mean to you, and like what are the goals? Right. I think ultimately we want to use a catch-all phrase in our space when we at the same time, we talk out of both sides of our mouth. We're like, oh, we're talking about the importance of the individual personalization, right? We're using a catch-all for like a very broad world when we're also at the same time we're talking about personalization. Like that's just it can be confusing. Like, what are my goals? My goals are to lose weight or to bring my cholesterol down or to just eat less meat. Those are different things, and you approach them differently.
Right. And that's a really good point because people do kind of just make a wholesale statement and everything falls in that bucket. But you're saying that's really not the way it is. We need to be specific on what consumers we're trying to reach and the things that are important to them when we're looking at the trends, especially the trends. I guess I call it the sustainable trends, like the trends that then become a movement that then just become part of what we're doing and how we're eating and just become a part of all that's going on. But to your point too, you started with plant-based foods, but in general, I think there is a trend towards healthier eating. Is that what you're seeing out there?
I do believe in healthier eating, and I do believe, I think healthier eating can be carved into multiple ways. And I would almost look at it in two ways. One is clean ingredients, which I personally, I like to indulge in. What I eat is fairly clean, but I consume sugar and things of that nature. Right. And then there's like the healthier, which is like, things like sugar reduction, fat reduction, things of that nature. And so again, they're both relevant and fair. I'm a food person, and I've always believed that taste has to come first, right? For you to really be successful, taste has to come first. So again, unless you're doing something that is so unique, and let's use the term again, efficacious, where like taste doesn't matter because you're really changing people's lives, which there are plenty of wonderful brands out there that can at least touch on that. I think taste has to come first. And so, and I think this is an ethos of Mondelez and other multinationals in particular who sell a lot of the largest brands is if it tastes good, there's a chance. If it doesn't taste good, right? You might be speaking to a specific health need or diet or lifestyle, but at some point you're probably capped from a size standpoint, and that's just that's my belief. So we are very much still, even with early stage, better for you, clean ingredient, healthy brands, we are still a taste, our ethos, our thesis is still taste first.
Yeah, you're going to be limited to the people who aren't going to hold that health benefit or whatever the other benefit is. If the taste is substandard, you're the people that the taste will take over and they won't care as much about that health benefit.
Yeah, there's anything, right? Whether gluten-free, this, that, there's a meaningful group of people that they hold that the health piece sacred, and I respect that. And there's actually a very large marketplace for that. But that doesn't mean that it can't taste great, right? And so that's our thing.
Yeah, I've heard people talk a good game as far as healthy eating and all that, but they really taste good. Right. Whatever tastes good, and then next meal I'll make the healthier choice is kind of how people really think when they execute things. Well, talk to me about some of our projects that are going on. What's fun and innovative that you have going on in your different spaces that you're playing in?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting things going on in the world, right? I think that we're taking approaches as Mondelez Ventures, looking at new business models, right? New routes to market. And everybody's like, oh, DTC, this, that, but there's a lot going on in distribution. There's a lot going on in those areas that I think are interesting. And we're not, whether we're investing in those spaces or not is a different story, but those are the areas that are just fascinating. The things that people are doing in packaging. Like I just came across a company that's doing through a close friend, a wraps for, pallet wraps that are made out of like potato waste as opposed to petroleum basic. That is, those are different areas of sustainability that are fascinating. What's going on in the future of retail, I think is amazing. I was just at the US Open last week, and Amex has on the US Open grounds a couple of stores where you go in, you just tap your credit card, just a quick tap, walk through a turnstile, grab whatever you want to, and just walk out the door. And I know that, Amazon, others are testing those things, but what does that future of retail look like? I also take it from the lens, not just of early stage Mondelez, but how can all these different areas be effective for big, what I call big Mondelez? And it's fascinating stuff. And so for me, it's kicking the tires on space. I'm very familiar with brands and ingredients and things of that nature. Going beyond that is fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. I interviewed a university who's doing that touchless shopping with their snacks, where the college students go and get drinks and snacks, and right up your alley. And it's touchless. Same idea. They've actually got that happening in Washington, D.C. Right now. That's a project that they have going. So it's just whatever you take off the shelf. It's kind of like, okay, we're charging for that.
Right.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Just the different trends that are going. But then again, I mean, there's a lot of good examples out there. I know you talked about your coLab environment. Correct me if I got the terminology wrong, where you have people that are joining with you and have had some great successes from, helping brands figure out how to navigate, that changing space to get them launched out there and work through that. I mean, that's some of the expertise that you're bringing to the table from what you said before. As I understand.
Yeah, it has been awesome for us, and the team, my boss Bridget Wolf, Jackie Haney on my team, they've been amazing, and they've built, really, in my mind, a best in class program. Accelerators can, after there's like 100 accelerators out there, and they could be a bit of a taboo, but our team, the two of my colleagues I mentioned, they went out with the organizations to support, to build something that was unique. And it's really not just saying that we're bringing the resources of Mondelez to bear, but it's actually bringing the resources of Mondelez to bear. So everything from, packaging and design support to brands struggling with a retailer and, talking to our teams, right? We're one of the large food companies in the world. Our teams have, great relationships with most retailers, if not all of them. And so getting our teams insights into best in class execution, even introductions has been absolutely tremendous for these brands. And these are brands that we're not investors in. These are brands that we don't have equity in, but the material impact that we can make on them has been tremendous. And frankly, the material impact that the founders, right, we've given the founders really open access to the organization. And so we're not trying to keep them in a little box in the corner and say, hey, we're Mondelez, we're doing this. It's really been putting our money where our mouth is, and having these founders spending time and interacting within our organization, has helped our teams, in North America and others around the world kind of just, again, it's hard to have a big company change, but if we can start with thinking differently, I think that's pretty tremendous and highly impactful.
Well, and you're dealing with a couple different things here, because really the marketplace is very volatile in a lot of areas. And, those newer companies, we always think about incubators. I do anyway, in the terms of like software, technology, that's the common place where we see that. But to bring it into the food space and actually, just help get the information out and take, we've talked about this with sustainability with some other big companies, what you're doing in this area and being able to share that kind of raises the whole industry, which is what I'm saying that Mondelez is doing, to be able to empower some of these smaller companies that have great ideas to be able to launch in a meaningful way and navigate what are the challenges. We have all kinds of challenges. We have inflation and supply chain, and you're able to help by giving a view, right?
there's so much to think about. Like I look at founders, I've been investing in founders for a decade now. And you look at the amount of stuff that founders were dealing with, which was a lot, 7, 8, 9 years ago. It was immense. I can't even put it all on paper. And now with the complications and the volatility, when you layer that on post-COVID, supply chain, business model, this, that, you got to give founders, an immense amount of credit for navigating the path, and I my respect only grows for them on a daily basis. I think from a Mondelez standpoint, it's from a coLab standpoint, the program has been designed to give them best in class access. But I still look at it like this: any kind of platform and resource, it's ultimately up to the founder to maximize their experience, right? And so, for me, it's super basic. It's collaboration, how you interact, what your how are you looking to tap into the resource? How respectful are you? How time sensitive are you? How focused are you, frankly, is more important, right? You can't just go in and ask somebody in supply chain, hey, can you fix my supply chain? Like, somebody at Mondelez can't fix your supply chain, but if you're having trouble on procurement, maybe they can help you. If you're having trouble with somebody who, a part for machinery, again, not saying the answer is always yes. Being focused is, and I'm talking about very acute things, but I think even that focus is kind of, is everything. It also, right? I think that founders also, certainly, I think one of the things that we've worked hard on is getting them to focus on the right things in their business. Attention to detail is important, and kind of focusing on even the small things. But like, what are the strategic priorities? And you only have so much bandwidth. This is Mondelez's view. This is where the buddies and the mentors and the coLab platform are there to help. Is the work you're doing there to support your strategy and kind of what needs to get done?
Yeah. And that's so important, Tapan, because a lot of times founders and entrepreneurs are all down in the details and the execution on every day, and to help them have that view and come up to the executive level and make those strategic decisions and direction choices. I would say that's golden. That probably is the difference between success and failure for a lot of newer founders, and the fact that you're giving that guidance. Now, that's the coLab piece, but in your Snack Futures Ventures, where you're investing in your portfolio companies, are you also kind of helping them along as well with that investment?
Yeah, we are extremely hands-on investors. And again, much like I talked about coLab and the resources of Mondelez, like obviously the broader resources of Mondelez, right? Capital included, a big part of our investment thesis. So, we have brand marketing experts. We're actually, I'm getting off this podcast with you and jumping into a brand strategy session with some internal Mondelez experts who've worked on some of the largest brands in the world, but also created, some of the best brand successes. So we are, we look at it very much as, our optimal world as a brand grows, and we have the opportunity to fold them into our portfolio in the future, and ultimately, part of that is the collaborative process we go on to help grow and build that business.
Yeah, and it's such a unique perspective. Thank you for sharing that with us today about what Mondelez is doing on these 3 different levels, really, to work in their space, but to work to further, move everybody forward. And I just think that's empowering, and it's just a great spirit, a great culture to hear about, that everybody's, cooperatively working together and trying to help people work through the challenges that they're facing and that everybody's facing. But you're sharing the wealth, essentially, sharing the knowledge and trying to help everybody move through. I just think it's just a cool topic. And I don't know what I might not have asked about, but I would love to hear if there's any insight, any messaging that you would like to share with our FutureFoodCast audience that we haven't already covered this morning.
I actually want to go to your last point, which is this industry, it's given me everything, and it's been amazing and always been incredibly collaborative. And as the market gets more volatile, as different types of capital come in, I think that the maintaining of the collaboration and kind of the communication and just how we can all work together, because ultimately, right, there's 2 things here. One, this is food. It should be fun. and two, this is food. It could better people's lives. I think that like if we look at it from that perspective, like ultimately we should all be in the game of doing it together. It's been a great industry. There's a lot of exciting things, to the audience. There's a lot of exciting things happening, and just go and pick something that is passionate for you and just go attack it. And trust me, you'll affect a lot of change.
Well, thanks for those positive words of encouragement. And we are so happy that you spent some time with us on the Future Foodcast today. Thanks a lot, Tapan.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.